Hey everybody, my name's Corbin McGee. This is my first YouTube video for, I'm going to start doing reviews for Shapiro's Sunday special. And I'm also going to try to make as many reviews possible of all the debates, all the events, every seminar, every conference that involves the intellectual dark web. Because I think it's just a fascinating phenomenon in our society right now. So every Sunday, Shapiro sits down with somebody from the IDW or just maybe like an interesting person for like just a clever kind of nice quiet chat on a Sunday afternoon. And this recent one he did is with Joe Rogan. So if you don't know who Joe Rogan is, then you probably have been living under a rock for the last like year and a half or 2-3 years, because he's basically the king of the podcast. I mean, if you're on the Rogan Experience, I mean, your popularity and notoriety kind of jumps up. Everybody knows you. So basically, they start off the entire. It's about a 1-hour discussion, and what's really interesting to me is that Shapiro never really interviews guests. It's kind of rare. I've been watching his show on the Daily Wire for a while now. You rarely get any guests, so it's interesting to see him in the interview instead of the interviewer instead of the interviewee. And Rogan, on the other hand, you always see him as an interviewer. You never see him as a interviewee. And it's interesting because you hear Rogan's, people don't really ask him questions. He's usually asking the question, vice versa with Shapiro. So it was nice to see them flip-flop and go vice versa. But yeah, the conversation was excellent, great, and just as you would expect. I mean, they talked about MMA, they talked about gender, they talked about Roseanne, the intellectual dark web, if you want to call it that. A couple other things about where to go forward with communal institutions and things like that. So it was a fascinating conversation, but nothing new actually. So to start off, Shapiro basically talks about a little bit of MMA, and basically what I'm going to talk about is we're going to pull a couple nuggets out and see, and so I can let you guys know if it's actually worth watching or not, which as I recommend, it definitely is. So to start off, they start off talking about MMA, obviously. And what's interesting is they talk about the rise of MMA, and Joe actually makes one comment, which I think is very, very an interesting comment about how the rise of MMA is like, it's about the human experience, it's something cathartic about it, something there's also stoic about it, how it's, men who, sit in offices all day, who have mundane jobs, are usually the biggest like NFL and UFC fans. And there's something to that, something to be said. And if you read Peterson's book, the 12 Rules to Life, and the Antidote to Chaos, I think is the full name of it, he talks specifically about the warrior mentality and how a lot of men lose that. And that is a perfectly normal thing. Jocko Willink does a podcast about the whole thing. You should definitely check it out, about the warrior mentality and how that's innate in a lot of men and a lot of people. And I think in today's society, a lot of that is kind of dwindling away. You're noticing rises in UFC, people playing, like rugby is a big sport now in the United States, and a lot of people are getting into more contact things, and it's just it's a very interesting bit. So they kind of segue into gender, which, I mean, if you've been watching the Shapiro videos and you've been watching the Rogan stuff, they have a lot to say about gender. I don't know where I stand on it, to be honest, because it's all kind of new to me. I think we all need to kind of take a step back and start to really look at the data and really start to really break down the social scientists and break down the gender studies programs, and really and look into this, because I think it's just kind of all brand new. It's coming out of nowhere. But they make a very interesting point about the left, is that the left is always very very pro-science until it gets to the point about gender and biological differences and whatnot, and that's when it gets a little fuzzy for the left. So yeah, that was a very interesting discussion. So, but also at the same time, but then they kind of segue into Roseanne, which I'm looking at my notes here. The bit about Roseanne, I'm over it. I'm over it. I don't think it's. I think we just need to like kind of let that go. But what's very interesting to me is not so much about the Roseanne bit, because Rogan points out that she's crazy, she's mentally ill, and she's on medication and needs help, right? And I don't know if Ambien makes you racist. I don't know if that's one of the side effects, but I doubt. But however, my biggest thing is with the Samantha Bee. I mean, Samantha Bee just blatantly dropped the C word on national television about the daughter of the president of the United States. I'm not even a Trump supporter, but still, come on, can't be doing that. It's not good. And what's really bothersome is the fact that we've zero backlash from this feminist camp. Where are you on this one? So the hypocrisy is unbelievable. They didn't talk about that, but I thought I'd just bring it up. But they talked a little bit about Roseanne, and they didn't fall into outrage culture, which I'm really happy they didn't do that, because I think Roseanne's tweet was a little much. But however, at the same time, Rogan saying that people were going to boycott his podcast, and he just said, and because how could you let that neo-Nazi racist out of blah 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 xenophobe, all that stuff on your podcast? How could you do that? And Rogan basically said, he goes, I think people need a chance to defend themselves, and I want to interview one of the best stand-up comedians of all time, and I want to have a conversation. That's what he's about. It's all about the conversation, and it was interesting. So it's about a couple minutes in, and then we kind of from Roseanne, where did we go from there? And then basically Shapiro obviously kind of wants to go and talk about politics a little bit. So they discuss the Trump presidency. And Rogan basically said, well, it's been a year since we spoke between Shapiro and Rogan. And he's like, how do you feel? And he's like, I feel that, nothing, I feel that, it would have been a disaster under Hillary, and it's kind of like a disaster right now. And he goes, I don't think it would have been much of a difference. I don't know how much I believe in that. I voted, it doesn't matter who I voted for, but it wasn't the guy in office. And he makes he talks about, Shapiro asked him like, what would you like to see differently? And he states that he thinks it's ridiculous that we have the alpha chimp, whoever the most popular chimp is, and the chimp becomes the leader of the free world. And kind of Rogan goes on a little bit of a diatribe about, how ridiculous the system is, which I kind of agree. I mean, in 1776, being president was a lot different in 2018. And there's also, he made a very interesting point about voting, that you should be able to vote online, which I kind of agree with that, because the idea that I need to take a day off of work and, maybe drop my kids off somewhere, or I get a babysitter to go and actually cast my ballot is kind of ridiculous, and it doesn't really encourage high voter turnout, which we're seeing. I mean, what is the voter turnout? 40%? 50? Not even, I think, something like that. Especially in the midterm, I think it's 35%. It's like really low, extremely low. So I think if we voted online, it'd be a little bit different. But what Rogan pointed out, what I think was really interesting, is he said like what may be good that comes out of all this chaos and nonsense that we see from both sides, from left and the right, and which I think Shapiro and I think a lot of people can agree, is that this may bring a lot of people actually together and actually bring people in, and maybe we could think about different ways on how to make sure a lot of issues are addressed, and a lot of ways we can rethink on how our political discourse. Maybe rethink how we do voting, how we do the whole system. So we'll see. But Shapiro also pointed out a very interesting point, that the checks and balances worked. I mean, with all the totalitarian kind of tendencies that we were expecting. I mean, like, I wasn't really expecting, but the checks and balances are working. This isn't Viktor Orban in Hungary or Erdogan in Turkey. This is the institutions were put in place for a reason, and they're working. So it's pretty good. So we kind of move on. They move on a little bit. Talk a little bit about PC culture. I think we can all agree that we're all sick of it and it needs to stop. whether you're on the right or the left. I mean, if you're still hanging on to the PC culture thing, grow up. And I think it's time that we South Park does it the best. I mean, they ripped him apart in the season 19. I think it's season 19. But the PC police needs to die out, and I think we can all agree on that. I don't think we need to spend any more time talking about that. I think we're all in agreement with that one. And if you're on the far left and you're saying that we need to crack down on more people and crack down on speech and saying that you can't say this and I can't say that, obviously in extreme cases, come on, let's be serious. But I mean, like, this is ridiculous. I've been dealing with this since undergraduate, and so anyways. But now to the most important part. Oh, we're at 10 minutes. I'll try to wrap this up. Probably the most important part, the most interesting part of the interview, which I want to really delve into after the Barry Weiss article in the New York Times. I mean, I've been listening to these guys for about a year and a half now, all of them, and I'm not saying I agree with all of them, but what's refreshing, and I think people are thirsty for a genuine, honest conversation between all different groups of people, is the intellectual dark web. Whether you like them or you don't, they are a phenomenon, and we need to take them seriously. And whether you're on the left or you're on the right, especially when you're left, because if you're on the left, I mean, these guys, I mean, they're turning people from that far left, and they're bringing people into the fold. And I think a lot of leftists don't see that, and they're doubling down on that same rhetoric that lost them the election. You are racist, sexist, homophobe, blah, 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 all that stuff. I mean, if you even differ at all from the tribe, if you agree with any of these people, and it's like, oh, well, you're part of that group, and it's like, calm down. So I think the left is really starting to see a big divide, and I think that the intellectual dark web, which I actually don't like that name, it's kind of pretentious, is really fueling that divide in a good way. I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So, but what was great is Ben Shapiro kind of described the intellectual dark web as basically a group of people who hate groups. And I kind of cracked Rogan up. Excuse me, I got allergies. And so, they kind of go through just how it all started a little bit. I mean, if you're interested in that, I mean, the term intellectual dark web came from Eric Weinstein. And Eric Weinstein, his accomplishments in mathematics are pretty well renowned, but however, he's best known for, I wouldn't say he's best known for, but his brother, Brett Weinstein, is the guy that refused to go home whenever Evergreen College said all the white people needed to go home, and he said, I ain't doing that. And then like a mob of people with baseball bats came after him, and it just became like this huge story. People just went insane. If you don't know who Brett Weinstein is, look up the Evergreen College thing. It was ridiculous. It was horrible. And what the left doesn't understand, the crazier you act, the more you drive people towards the middle, the more these people become famous, and they become, their notoriety just goes way up, not notoriety is the wrong way of putting it, but their popularity goes up a lot. So, Shapiro asked one very interesting thing. He said, he asked Rogan, he said, what do you think? Why is this phenomenon? What did this happen? How did this all start? And Rogan stated that it's dishonesty. It's dishonesty. And it's just people being dishonest, not having genuine conversations. And people are thirsty for it. To have a genuine, actual, real conversation for, 3 hours on a podcast about things that we're not even, that are old belief systems. Classical liberalism is an old belief system. Like, what are we talking about? Biological differences. Like, come on, really? This is an actual discussion. This is controversial, and I think that just dishonesty in my own. I have a master's degree, and I can say with certainty I know multiple professors who were actively dishonest in our classes, who skewed data, who manipulated data to push an ideology and an agenda. I mean, and you look at, say in academia, professors are activists. They're not professors. It's ridiculous. Journalists are activists. They're not journalists. So I don't think people are stupid. I think people genuinely see that, and they see that No, we're being run by these people are activists. They're not legitimate professors. They're not legitimate journalists. It's ridiculous. And that's why I think these IDWs are very popular, because these guys aren't pushing an agenda. They're not pushing an ideology. They're just stating this is fact, and let's have a discussion about it. Ben Shapiro is pushing an ideology, but at least he's upfront about it. Crowder is upfront about it. These guys are upfront about it, at least, when they are pushing the ideology. They say, yeah, I'm right wing and I'm telling you this. But the dishonesty especially in the left, with just especially news and especially academia is just palpable. It's ridiculous. And I'm an undergraduate in political science and have a master's degree in public administration, and I can say from experience, just the dishonesty of academia is bad, and it's real. And putting ideology over actual facts. Anyways, but they talk about what they all have in common and everything, and it's Rogan made a good point. So what the IDWs have in common is they all said, "What the fuck is going on?" So I like that. I think that made me laugh a little bit. They kind of go through a little more about just about tribalism, people. And Rogan talks about, the tribalism. He talks about it in his podcast a lot. However, but I want to end, because we're getting at 16 minutes. We're getting a little late here. Shapiro brings up Robert Putnam, too. And also, we're going to discuss a little bit in later videos Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell, if you understand Thomas Sowell and you read Thomas Sowell, you'll understand the right-wing side of the IDWs. You'll understand that. And I have the book here, Black Rednecks and White Liberals, right here, that we're going to go over in another video. But if you understand that and you read that, you'll get a lot of these. You'll understand where these guys are coming from. This is probably one of the most unbelievable books I've ever read in my life. And I've been, indoctrinated with liberal economics, liberal social, democratic social, all that stuff. And this kind of blows it all apart. However, Ben talks about the breakdown of communal institutions, and how one of the reasons why we're so tribal now, that we've never been this tribal before, is because he mentions Robert Putnam's book Bowling Alone. You can't really see it. There it is. And he states that the breakdown of communal institutions, like, for example, like the church and like bowling leagues and like softball leagues, and just things that you can get together as a group where it didn't really matter what your race or sexual, no one really gave a shit. You just all kind of either played a sports, you were part of something, you were part of some type of community, right? Where now you're based off of community based on your immutable characteristics, which before it wasn't. You were on a community. When you went to church, no one cared about whether you were black, whether you were white, whether you were this, you were that. It didn't really matter, at church. And I'm not a religious guy, but I grew up Catholic and with Irish, with mix and Guineas and hunkies in Pittsburgh. I could say that for a fact. And you don't see that anymore. And he mentions that under military, like, no one cares about that stuff. No one cares about your immutable characteristics. You're all soldiers. Doesn't really matter. And to wrap up, it was interesting. It was just a great conversation. And this is what we need. We need more conversations. We need stuff like this. This idea that we're all going to, just keep on retreating into the internet, retreating into our little safe spaces. It needs to stop. It's ridiculous. And Rogan points that out at the end. He's like, look, he goes, I'm just, I'm interested in interesting people. That was a great quote. I'm interested in interesting people. I don't care where you're from. I don't care what you do. Obviously, there are some deplorable human beings that you're not going to have David Duke on there. It's like ridiculous. But at the same time, people need to talk to each other, regardless of what side you're on. And I hate to say it, but my own tribe on the left, like, we are one of the worst people at that. One of the worst groups of people. I mean, you need to open up to the other side, or we're going to keep on getting crazy elections like we saw in 2017, 2016. Oh man, it's already been a year and a half. Anyways, thank you for listening. If you're gonna watch those guys, I mean, it's great. It's a great discussion. Sorry, the video is a little long, but if you liked what you hear and you want to have a discussion, you want to email, send me a link or send me a comment comment section or subscribe to my page. This is my first video. So, and then we'll go from there. Hopefully I see you next Sunday, or I'm going to do a couple Jordan Peterson things as well. We'll go from there. All right. Have a good one.